Hello everyone and welcome to our instruction course today on all about phakic intraocular lenses. To kickstart the IC, I would like to invite Dr. Aarti Heda to present her talk on the different types of phakic IOLs that are available and how to choose which one. So Aarti, you can share your screen.
Sure. At the outset, I would like to thank Team Moss and Dr. Mukesh Pariani for this wonderful opportunity. Today, I'll be talking on different types of phakic IOLs available. Phakic IOLs can be divided into anterior chamber angle-supported phakic IOLs that function with haptics positioned in the ankle where the iris and cornea meet. Anterior chamber iris-fixated phakic IOLs that use small lobster claws to enclavate iris tissue and position the phakic IOL in front of the pupil, and posterior chamber phakic IOLs that use plate haptics to support and position the lens in the posterior chamber. Each design has its own features, selection criteria, surgical technique, results, and complication. I'll be discussing posterior chamber phakic IOL in this talk. Posterior phakic IOLs were launched in 1980s, driven by the complications associated with angle-supported phakic IOLs. By positioning the phakic IOLs further back and away from the cornea, it was hypothesized that the risk of corneal complications would diminish. Types of posterior chamber phakic IOLs currently available include implantable Collamer lens by Star Surgical, Icryl phakic lenses by Biotech Vision Care, implantable phakic contact lens or IPCL by Care Group, and refractive implantable lens by Appaswamy and Associates. The implantable Collamer lens is currently the most widely used posterior chamber phakic IOL. It incorporates material with increased biocompatibility known as Collamer. This material attracts deposition of a monolayer of fibronectin on the IOL surface that inhibits aqueous protein binding and makes the IOL invisible to the immune system. The lens also has ultraviolet absorbing chromophore. For models V2 and V3, the reported complications were small percentages of pupillary block and pigmentary dispersion glaucoma. However, late anterior subcapsular opacities of the crystalline lens occurred in 5% to 30% of the cases after 1 to 3 years of follow-up and are attributed to intermittent contact between ICL and the crystalline lens. The lens underwent a number of design modifications. The current model, the Vision ICL V4, is a rectangular single-piece IOL, 7.5 to 8 mm wide, available in 4 overall lenses. 11.5 to 13 mm in 0.5 mm steps for myopia correction and 11 to 12.5 mm in 0.5 mm steps for hyperopic correction. The optic diameter ranges from 4.65 to 5.5 mm in myopic ICLs, depending on the diopteric power. It is always 5.5 mm in hyperopic ICLs. The available power ranges from -3 to -23 diopter for myopic ICLs, from +3 to +22 for hyperopic ICLs, and with an added positive cylinder of +1 to +6 diopters for toric ICLs correcting myopia. The ICL can be inserted through a 3 mm incision using a micro-injector. It has orientation markings on its haptics, allowing control during the unfolding maneuver. The thickness is less than 50 in the optic zone, 500 to 600 in the haptic zone, and 100 in the haptic foot plates, which are theoretically positioned in the ciliary sulcus using a spatula specially designed for the ICL. The basic design change of the ICL V4 addresses the vaulting. This model has an additional 0.13 to 0.21 mm anterior wall due to the steeper radius of curvature of the base curve, which depends on the diopter power. The higher wall provides a greater space between the posterior surface of the ICL and the anterior surface of the crystalline lens, which allows fluid change of nutrients and prevents the contact between the ICL and the crystalline lens. Shimizu et al. Have developed the latest model of the Vision ICL V4C. This lens includes a 360 KS aquaport located in center of the optic, which is designed to restore a more natural aqueous flow, reducing the incidence of cataract postoperatively and eliminating the need for an iridotomy after implantation. It was seen that at 6 months, 95% and 100% eyes were within plus 0.5 and plus 1 diopter of targeted correction, respectively. Change in manifest refraction from week 1 to month 6 was plus 0.6. No significant rise in intraocular pressure, including pupillary block or a secondary cataract, occurred in any case during the observation period. Next we have is acryl phakic IOLs. They are monofocal hydrophilic acrylic foldable single-piece posterior chamber IOLs, available in diopter range of -3 to -23. Toric form is also available with a range of -5 diopters to -23 with 0.5 diopter step. The company claims that it has excellent visual outcome, easy to load, easy to implant. Familiar with the injection system design, it has presence of central and peripheral holes. There is a very less chance of flip and rotation with higher range of correctable refractive errors. It has online version and offline mobile application with innovative stock availability option to find out appropriate model. Next we have is the implantable phakic contact lens by Care Group. It is like a single piece phakic IOL. It can be inserted through 2.8 mm sub-incision and is made up of axially oriented hydrophilic acrylic copolymer material. The wide range of plus 15 to -30 diopter with cylinder up to 10 diopters and add for presbyopia up to plus 4 diopters makes it unique. New spring haptic pad design provides excellent white-to-white positioning. The central hole has been specially designed to avoid visual disturbances. The company claims that it is easy to implant with excellent quality of vision, fast recovery, very stable over time, no regression, any customization is possible and retains the corneal asphericity. Next we have is refractive implantable lens by Appaswamy and Associates. It is made up of hydrophilic acrylic material with 26% of water content and is available in wide range of size 11.5 mm to 13.25 mm in 0.25 steps with optic size of 4.5 mm to 5 mm. It has 4 holes for aqueous flow tracking. However, it does not have a central hole. Vaulting is above 1.2 mm with smooth anterior surface. It is available in wide range of -1 diopters to -21 diopters. I would like to end my talk here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Aarti, for thoroughly covering this expansive topic. Very clear and crisp presentation. I would like to start my next talk, which is on investigating a case for phakic intraocular lens. Is my screen visible?
Yes, it's visible.
Please, yeah.
Thank you. So phakic IOLs are lenses that are placed in a phakic eye where the natural crystalline lens is already present. When do we use phakic intraocular lenses? When the patient is usually not suitable for corneal laser procedures. Either the refractive error is too high, or the corneal thickness is insufficient, or the topography is suspicious, or the predicted post-operative K is either too steep or too flat. So rejects for corneal laser are usually the candidates for phakic intraocular lenses. But what's the inclusion criteria? First, before any refractive procedure, the stability of refraction, not more than half a diopter change in the past year. Like Dr. Aarti covered the dioptric range, usually the Star Vision ICLs can correct up to 16 diopters. They're available now up to 18 diopters for myopia, whereas the IPCL is available up to 30 diopters of myopia with almost 10 diopters of astigmatism. Hyperopia is tricky, but the IPCL is available from plus 15 diopters dioptric range, and a presbyopic version is also available with the IPCL. The age criteria, usually the recommended age range is from 21 to 45 years. The anterior chamber depth is critical, and ideally it should be 3 millimeters or more, but I would say at least 2.8 millimeters is necessary. A good endothelial count, open angles, and a mesopic pupil not more than 6 millimeters is what we are looking for. Any ocular comorbidity like a corneal endothelial problem, uveitis, cataract, glaucoma would be contraindications to go ahead with a phakic IOL. Though it is used for correcting myopia, astigmatism, and small hyperopias, it can also be used for treating any residual refractive errors post corneal laser procedures or in pseudophakics, or in a case of stable early keratoconus or stabilized keratoconus after cross-linking. And these are the off-label uses. A thorough history is mandatory when we are working up the case. We have to ensure that the refraction is stable, and we are looking for any previous history of any corneal laser or trauma or any coexisting ocular or systemic condition. A detailed ocular examination that would necessarily start with refraction, a dilated refraction, intraocular pressure, and again ruling out ocular comorbidities like looking at the cornea in detail, looking at the angles with gonioscopy, the iris configuration and pupil shape and size, and also a dilated examination to ensure that there's no cataract and the zonules are not weak, there's no phacodonesis, so that there's good support to place the phakic IOL, and also a detailed retina examination to look for peripheral retinal lesions in these high myopes. This is the list of investigations that is necessary, but essentially they are required because to calculate the power and size of the phakic intraocular lens, the software, there's an online software available specific to each company that Aarti had just discussed, or we can use the offline calculators with the help of the company representatives. And in these, we need to enter the manifest refraction of the patient, the keratometry and the axis. These will help us derive the power of the phakic IOL, while the size is determined by two important parameters. First is the anterior chamber depth. Second is the white-to-white measurement. Pachymetry reading is also necessary. So I'm going to elaborate a little on the ACD and white-to-white measurements. So anterior chamber depth is measured usually from the corneal endothelium, and this can be derived from any topography machine that we have handy, or an optical biometer, but that would measure it from the epithelium, and you would need to deduct the corneal thickness, or anterior segment imaging devices like the UBM and anterior segment OCT can also help us with this measurement. The anterior segment imaging devices are also useful in studying the iris configuration, ruling out any iris cysts that may interfere with placement of the ICL. They can also give us an idea of the angle configuration. Other than the anterior chamber depth, the horizontal dimension is the anterior chamber diameter. And like Dr. Aarti had discussed, usually in India, the popular phakic intraocular lenses are the sulcus supported ones. So we are placing the phakic IOL in the sulcus, and it would be ideal if we were able to measure the sulcus to sulcus distance. And this is possible. The sulcus can be visible only by the UBM study. So the ultrasonic biomicroscopy is the anterior segment imaging device, but getting a very perfect image in order to view and then measure the sulcus is quite tricky. So this is one such perfect image where it's horizontally balanced and symmetrically aligned around the midline. The apices of the cornea, anterior posterior capsule are perfectly aligned. And here the green arrows show us the sulcus. Here we can measure the sulcus to sulcus distance, but what we usually require in the calculators that we use is the horizontal white to white distance. All phakic intraocular lenses are placed horizontally, and a white to white distance can be measured by one of three: either a caliper, which could be a vernier caliper that can be used and then plotted on a piece of paper and measured with a ruler, or better, a digital caliper, or the topographers that we are using, either the Pentacam or OpScan, can give us white to white measurements. They can be again manually reconfirmed, or optical biometers can also give us horizontal white to white measurements, but they usually tend to overestimate them by at least 0.5 millimeters. So the ideal measurement usually is recommended is a digital caliper, wherein it should be done with the patient in the horizontal supine position in the operation theater under topical anesthesia, use a wire speculum, and this is how the prongs of the digital caliper would look. At least 3 readings per eye, wherein we are placing the tip of the caliper here. As you can see in this image here, it's white to white. It's not black to black. Okay, so it should just be at the edge of the limbus, just outside. And if it's possible, 2 observers can take readings so that we get accurate measurements for sizing. This is just an iris image on the topographer showing that we can manually again reconfirm the measurement that has been given automatically by the topographer. So we are assuming a parallel relationship between the white to white and sulcus to sulcus, which is true in Caucasians, but Orientals usually have like a wider sulcus as compared to the white to white, whereas in Asian population, in our population, the sulcus to sulcus measurement usually tends to be smaller than the white to white that we measure, which is a V pattern. And landing up with a higher vault is usually more common than landing up with a lower vault. So if it's possible, it's always a good idea to get a sulcus to sulcus measurement. And if it's within 0.5 millimeters of the recommended ICL size, you can just go ahead with the recommended size. If there's a difference of more than 0.25 millimeters, it can be undersized or oversized accordingly. Vault prediction software is also available with special advanced UBMs or topographers, wherein they not only measure the sulcus to sulcus, they can predict what the post-operative vault would be for a particular size of phakic IOL. So currently the ICL is available in 4 sizes from 12.1 to 13.7, and depending on our white to white measurement and our ACD measurement, it would recommend a particular size. And this is how our printout would look like. We enter in the refraction, keratometry, and depending on the white to white, we can choose whether we want a spherical or toric version of the lens, and we would get a printout for the size and power recommended. What to do if there's a big disparity between the white to white between the 2 eyes or between 2 devices? I think the best thing usually is to use multiple instruments, take multiple readings. If you're in doubt, please repeat the measurements on another day, or if it's possible for you to get a sulcus to sulcus measurement, that would be great. I would always recommend going ahead with surgery for one eye with the smaller measurement in this case, checking what the vault is post-operatively, and then going ahead and ordering the lens for the other eye. In cases of borderline ACD, I would say be very careful. It should be at least 2.8 millimeters, and it's always good to clinically gauge what the angle and iris configuration is. In order to start a phakic IOL practice, I would say accurate measurements are the first step. And even if you don't have it, please send your patient to a center that has a topographer and anterior segment imaging, optical biometry to get good measurements for you. Then you can do the calculation yourself online or take the help of the company representative. For the Star Vision ICL, you need to have undergone certified training because the loading is quite tricky. And you need special instruments as well. Again, you can borrow these from the company or you can purchase your own. Loading and injection is critical because there's little room for error in phakic IOLs. There's not much space for you to explant a flipped over ICL. So you have to be aware and be able to manage complications before you start this procedure by yourself. I would say there's a small learning curve, but if it's possible for you to get some hands-on training or attend some short courses or do it under supervision initially, that would be a great idea to set you up for success in the future. So I thank you for your attention, and I hope you're able to offer this procedure, wonderful procedure, to each of your patients. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ridhima. It was very crisp and elaborative coverage of the patient selection in doing a phakic IOL procedure. So we move on to the next talk, and I will be sharing my talk. I'll be talking about the tips and tricks of phakic IOL implantation. So my talk, I hope my slide is visible.
Yes, Mukesh.
Yes. So I will be totally taking you to the surgical tips and tricks, and it will be totally a video-based presentation of around 8 minutes, where I'm gonna speak about the tips and tricks that we use during the phakic IOL implantation. As you rightly said, the learning curve is not steep. It would be a pretty easy job for the cataract surgeons to implant a phakic IOLs. But there are some few things that I would discuss as we go through the videos. So the first one, the video I'm going to show is about the implantation of the STAR ICL, followed by the other companies ICL. I'm going to share some tips and tricks. It's very important for us that when we are making a side port, it has to be parallel to the iris. Just make sure that the patient, you have to make sure the patient is looking fairly straight and just go parallel to the iris. This is the injection intracameral lignocaine that we use for almost all the patients, makes it fairly painless. Then we inject a viscoelastic to this noodle. So we don't have to overfill the anterior chamber. We just have to make sure that it's filled with enough viscoelastic material. I use both the HPMC and nowadays I've shifted to sodium hyaluronate because it goes in very easily and comes out as a bolus if I have to wash visco at the end. So any of the option is okay. You can use an HPMC or a sodium hyaluronate. Avoid chondroitin sulfate as much as possible. Now you see I have the Vukix manipulator in my left hand. This is my guard, and I'll show you videos of how it kind of helps me while I'm slowly injecting the lens inside. This is just a guard to make sure that things open and work in absolutely the way I want to. Once the ICL is well inside, I go over the IOL and underneath the endothelium to deepen it a little bit for my Vukix manipulator to go in and perhaps do the tucking part. Now I'm going in a little bit of mid-periphery at the optic haptic junction, pulling in the haptic towards me and tucking it under the iris. This is followed by the similar procedure for the subincisional haptics. So it has two haptics and the orientation is most important here. So when I'm doing a STAR ICL, there is an orientation hole on the right upper corner and the left lower corner. And it is opposite for the care group ICL that we use, care group IPCL that we use. Once I make sure that the convexity is up and all the haptics are underneath the iris, what I usually do is I hydrate the main port because I don't need the main port anymore. And then perhaps I go from the side ports and do the irrigation aspiration. There are certain things that people ask, that how are we sure that the visco behind the IOL is also taken care of. That's why I have taken this effort on this video, that you will see there are some bubbles underneath the IOL which are now slowly coming up. Similar way, the visco also washes up. You see a wave at around 12 o'clock, wave of fluid. See this wave coming in. So this is basically the fluid which is replacing the viscoelastic underneath the IOL and above the crystalline lens. And this way we are pretty sure that we are kind of taking out as much as visco as possible. Now what we have shifted on to using a sodium hyaluronate viscoelastic. The best part about the sodium hyaluronate viscoelastic, it comes out as a bolus. The downside is because it is of a high such viscosity, when you're trying to take out the visco, there is a movement of the lens. Because the visco, when it comes out from underneath the lens, there is a movement of the lens, and then can be a little bit of movement, particularly when you're implanting a toric phakic IOL. So that is the only part you have to take care. Otherwise, any of the viscoelastic is good enough. Now we move on to the next one. I'm sure my slides don't include the loading of the STAR ICL, but I have the loading part of another Indian phakic IOL, which is the care group phakic IOL, and I don't have any financial interest in any of those. So when we are loading another one, this one is pretty simple. We just have to load it like any other intraocular lens. I use predominantly either the ringer lactate or the balancol solution with a minimum of viscoelastic. The lens is loaded in a routine manner. Just make sure the convexity is up, and also there are two markings. There are two notches which has to be left upper. The leading has to be on the left side and the trailing has to be on the right side. This makes sure that the convexity is up and you don't land up in an inverted phakic IOL inside the eye. There are two additional holes which are supposed to be towards the brow or on the superior side for the additional aqueous flow. Now we make sure that the haptics are not stuck in the butterfly cartridge, so butterfly hinges. So we make sure all the loading of the phakic IOLs are always done under the microscope. Then we move on to the actual implantation. This being a toric IOL, toric phakic IOLs always implanted at 0 and 180 degrees. As I've always said that, you have to be very parallel to the iris, go in and come out. I'll skip these particular steps. We will directly go to the injection part. You saw this toric IOL marking here. This is where exactly my IOL I'm gonna place. And even this IOL is fairly easy to go in. All the phakic IOLs go well through 2.8. I've never tried it less than that, or even never required to do it more than 2.8. The Vukix manipulator stands as a guard, and I told you why it helps is because, if in case the things go on the other side, it helps you. IOL goes in really well, no problem, and it helps us to settle it up a little bit. So even this is fairly easy to insert, and then the haptics are tucked in a routine fashion. So this is under high magnification. I have just done it under high magnification to show this notch here. If you can see on the left upper corner, there is a notch. I'm putting a viscoelastic there just to make sure that the orientation of the IPCL is fairly easy, and on the right lower side. Once I've assured that my IOL is well in place and the haptics are marked well, haptics are in a 0-180 degree position. After tucking it, I just wash the visco as I had shown it with the star ICL and come out. Now, in some of the cases where the ACD is borderline, I still do a PI despite having a central hole. So I usually perform the PI using my vitrectomy cutter. I have just put in a pilocarpine, and I use my cutter to make a small PI on the superior quadrant. So always it's better, whenever in doubt, if you have a borderline ACT, higher refractive error, despite the company says that you can go ahead without making a YAC PI, it's always better to do a YAC PI. So I'll just go to my last slide. It is just a 1-minute video, but it's very important to show if I have to use an additional hand in implantation of a phakic IOL. It is just a 1-minute video, but it's very important for us to deal with such kind of complications when faced. Again, my Vukix manipulator is there on the left-hand side, and I am implanting my phakic IOL, but somehow it has come up in a lateral way. So it has made entry in a lateral way. So I am very much aware that, this can go either this way or that way. So I am just very patiently holding the phakic IOL there itself and not doing anything else, just making sure it is away from the endothelium and holding it there, while I tell my staff to give me a second instrument and slowly push the lens in a way which I want to. And I slowly push the lens in the way which I want to open, with the notch on the left upper side and right lower side. So always, if such kind of things happen, I think there is no need to panic. With patience, you will be able to grab another instrument and pretty well manage such kind of complication. But if there's a flip of the IOL, the best is to take it out, reload it, and put it back again. So I think my time is up. So thank you very much for patient hearing, and I will stop my talk here. And I invite the next speaker. Yes.
Thank you, Mukesh.
Yes, Dr. Tanvi.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
There we go. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'll be talking about the complications of phakic IOL that we may face. Fortunately for us today, the worst is over. We have to our disposal the modified and the better designs of phakic lenses. The disasters of the yesteryears and those with the anterior chamber and iris fixated IOLs are well behind us. The posterior chamber IOL has also evolved over time, giving us rather no excuse to not implant it. So wanting to move away from the endothelium, they came with this design of the posterior chamber lens. And over time, it has had its own problems of increased cataract formation, pupillary block glaucoma. So then they came up with the newest design, which was with the central hole, and which was giving us increased vault in the lens to overcome these issues. And yet here we are discussing the complications of phakic lenses. Complications essentially can be intraoperative or postoperative. The intraoperative complications may occur as a part of the surgeon's learning curve, like Ridhima explained, because there is very low scope for error. The loading of the lens may be a bit tricky, it can cause some issues. And if the eye has a non-dilating pupil while you're implanting it, it may become difficult to insinuate the haptics under the iris. Again, a non-clearance of the viscoelastic from the eye can raise the pressure of the eye immediately post-op. So I prefer to use methyl cellulose, even though Mukesh prefers the other way around, because I feel that even if I leave it a bit back, it won't bother the eye too much, versus if I leave a sodium hyaluronate, it could cause more inflammation since it's a little bit more bioactive. The post-operative complications can again be immediate or over a long period of time. Now, most of the immediate post-op complications are because of an error in judging the correct size of the lens, and that's still a gray area, like Ridhima said. And to understand the long-term complications of the phakic lenses, let's look at the retrospective series, which was conducted by Nakamura with 61 patients, which they followed up for a 10-year period. They all had implantation of the V4 toric ICL, and they found that there was regression over 10 years to almost -2 diopters. The mean percentage of the endothelial cell loss was around 5 to 12%, and almost 10% eyes developed subcapsular cataracts during the 5 to 10 year follow-up, and 4 eyes were symptomatic who needed ICL explantation and cataract surgery. The endothelial cell loss can be significant if the preoperative count is low. We need to know that, and this needs to be remembered in the preoperative workup, and probably can be followed up after the 3rd month point, because at which the surgery-induced endothelial cell loss would have been covered, and then you would know what is the further endothelial cell loss, if there is any. Another study, which was done by Schmidinger in 2010, showed that there was a consistent decrease in the vault height over 10 years. So the recommendation was to keep a minimum of 250 microns as a vault height post-operatively, and to target the size of the phakic lens, which will give you the largest vault height. Now I want to discuss a case that I had. This was a 24-year-old female with high myopia and flat gaze with low packing, which was planned for a phakic lens. Now, her toric phakic lens was implanted in the right eye. The first post-op day, I noticed that the IOL had rotated by 90 degrees. This was her vault on the first post-op day. Obviously, it is low. So looking at the rotation and, there was a low vault, we repeated her white to white of the other eye, because the other eye was planned the next day. We repeated the white to white of both the eyes with 2 methods, one digital as well as with the LensStar and the oculizer, or the biometries. And then in view of the low vault and the spontaneous rotation, we implanted a larger size lens in the other eye. And that was a toric phakic lens, which was implanted in left eye. Now that developed anterior subcapsular cataracts on day 1. So this is her left eye, which is showing very discrete anterior subcapsular opacities. Now these are the walls of her first eye, previously operated one, sequentially, with a difference of 2 to 15 days. And this is of her left eye. You can see that there is low vault on day 1, and you can also see those tiny anterior subcapsular opacities on the ASOCT. But thankfully, there was no rotation in the left eye, so she had good vision in that eye. Eventually, after the subcapsular opacities kind of diluted a bit. Now, the only difference in the surgical technique was that I had used a pilocarpine intraoperatively in the left eye, and which I hadn't done in the right. Now, it is very difficult to pinpoint what exactly went wrong, but it again boils down to a sizing issue. Now, this girl had a slightly different physiognomy. She was 6'3" in height. It is possible that her STS may have been larger than the white to white. What can be added in the future to aid us in this conundrum is that if we have an STS measuring machine, we could exclude these outliers, but the STS white correlation doesn't fit, and we could really avoid this problem. Another data point that I think we should consider is the lens rise, which is being studied of late, and which could help us monitor these patients over the years. Its true role as preoperatively is still under study. Having said that, I want to say that we need to monitor our phakic patients yearly. We need to we now know that there is a regression over years, and that there is reduced vault in the follow-ups. So a white to white can be so we need to have a look at them every year. The white should be confirmed with 2 devices, and it is a good idea to titrate the other eye based on the results of the first. This is a patient of ours who we've operated in 2000, and we are still up. You can see is showing it's becoming less and less. It is reducing, especially in the left eye. Now, this was taken in January of 2021. His left eye vault is almost negligible, and yet he enjoys decent vision. And hence, with proper counseling, he can still be under just observation. So don't rush to implant. See the patient, talk to him, and just go by that. Another case where we may not always go by the books is this. This was an 18-year-old female, low socioeconomic status, very, very keen to get rid of glasses for a marriage, wearing thick +7/+6 hyperopic number. And luckily for her, her anterior chamber depth was good. And I even considered or rather thought of putting a phakic lens. So we implanted her with a star ICL. It did not have a central hole. So 2 YAG PIs were done preoperatively. And this is her wall status 1 month post-op. So sometimes an uncharted path can still lead you to happiness. Don't be deterred by the complications, but choose your patients widely. Thank you for your patient listening.
Thank you, Dr. Tanvi, for a wonderful presentation. I have a quick question before we proceed. The lady, the 6 feet tall lady, the left eye, though, did the opacity subside over the period of time?
Yes, thankfully for my heart pressure, it did.
Yeah, because there has been these cases where you find these opacities immediately post-op, and we kind of correlated to some of the coatings of the cartridge. There were series of cases in 2017-18 where there was a coating material change in those cartridges, and we used to have these kind of patients, and we have documented over the period of clinical photos that the opacities they subside over the period of time.
So this probably wasn't that. I feel that, so I discussed this case with a lot of my senior professors when it did happen. And a lot of them said that, immediate use of intraoperative pilocarpine kind of caused the iris diaphragm to move and touch each other for a couple of hours, maybe post-surgery. And although she had a very good anterior chamber depth, there was no other reason why it should happen. But because there was a sizing issue and also because of the use of pilocarpine, it did touch. So the lens touch was there. So the photo that I have put is probably on day 3, day 4, because the first day, the entire central part of the lens was foggy. And she did say, I'm looking through clouds. So it was very foggy. And obviously in that stress, I couldn't even take that picture. But it did really.
Did lens have a central hole?
Yeah, yes, it did have a central hole. Yes, it did have a central hole. But she's doing well in the eye with the cataract and not so much in the other, which has rotated.
So I think even if we end up with a low vault, we shouldn't like hurry or panic or rush to explant a clean eye.
So
because I've had patients, where they can still do well. Okay.
So that other patient is of Dr. Haldipurkar. He's done him many, many years back, and he still comes for a follow-up. So the point is to call them for follow-ups, because that's something now I have started telling my patients, because otherwise, andar aankh mein hai, so is it going to be fine forever? No, you need to come for those yearly checkups. Things can always change from there.
But this is not the typical appearance of the anterior subcapsular cataract that you get post phakic IOL. Like this is not subcapsular, the image that you.
But if you see on the ASOCT, it did show that it was. Did you notice that there was? They were exactly subcapsular there.
Okay. Thank you. Wonderful presentation.
So we have the next talk from Dr. Anuprita Gandhi, and she's going to speak about the management of cataract in a post-phakic IOL. Quickly, Dr. Tanvi, what is the percentage as of now for cataracts post-phakic IOL in your practice, and Dr. Ridhima also?
So if you've been doing it for so long, and then the patient will come to you. So I would say, do you mean immediately post-op or in the long run?
No, percentage. How many patients of you have seen operated of phakic IOLs and for your operated and come with a cataract? Percentage. As a
complication of phakic lens,
Yes.
Oh, okay, very low. I mean, 0.1%, let's say 1%.
Dr. Ridhima?
I've not had any in my patients operated, but I've seen 2 cases when I was in Narayana Nethralaya. But I think the kind of lenses used at that time were different. So with the newer generation with central holes, I've not seen any case.
Yes, the central hole makes a lot of difference. A good oxygenation happens on the central capsule. So the cataract the things have come down pretty, pretty much. So Dr. Anuprita, please proceed with the management of cataract in eyes with phakic IOLs.
Yeah, sure. Am I audible? Is my screen seen?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So right now, what you are discussing about the complications, rightly or Tanvi has said, so I'll be focusing on tract as a complication of phakic IOL. So recently, you can say around 3 to 4 months back, I've been seeing around 4 patients. Yes, they were not with the central aqua port, but yeah, 4 patients with 8 eyes who had developed this cataract. So that created my interest in this topic, and then I went and did a lot of research, and then obviously I found out that the vaulting was not very ideal in those cases. So my talk today is about management of cataract in eyes with phakic IOLs in place. Now that we are in the era of post-refractive surgeries. Now these patients are coming up with cataracts, and it is of paramount importance and to know the nitty-gritties of how to manage cataracts in these patients. So let's look at the epidemiology. Right now, Mukesh was asking about the percentage of cataracts. So with many studies, it's seen that almost 2.7% of the patients who have been implanted with V4 model are having cataracts, and with V4C model, where there is aqua port in the center, this rate has reduced down to 0.2%. This is possibly because of the central aqua port, where the aqueous humor circulation to the lens is better. Where is cataract seen? So it is majorly seen as a late post-operative complications, and it is majorly seen where the vaulting of the ICL is less than 100 microns. Here you can see the vaulting less than 100 microns. It is also seen relatively rarely in the early post-operative period, and that is thought to be because of the surgical manipulations leading to lens touch and prolonged exposure to the viscoelastics, which result in the lens epithelial changes. So most commonly what is seen is the anterior subcapsular cataract. And the next common is nuclear sclerosis. Because most of these patients are myopic, the myopic nuclear sclerosis is more commonly seen. What are the major concerns in the perioperative period? The first is, because this is seen in high myopic patients, the retinal evaluation is of very big importance. The other major concern is the endothelial count, and the next is the selection of IOL. I'll go to each topic one by one. Now let's start with the pre-operative evaluation. What I observed with the recent 8 patients is we have to set the patient expectations right, because already they have undergone the surgery for refractive surgery for their glasses, and explaining them that they are having cataract now which needs to be operated becomes a little tougher. So setting up realistic goals, because now they're going to get away with the near vision and accommodation is going to be lost. So setting up a realistic goal and expectations is very important. So detailed discussion about the visual requirement to decide about either the monovision of targeting myopia postoperative or emetropia for distance is very much important, which can be related to their profession. Risk should be informed to the patients because of the second surgery. You can see in the eye the risk of retinal detachment, of course, because most of them are myopic, is increased. Specular count and specular is very important in these cases to know the endothelium, how it is, because we don't want a decompensated cornea and a majorly unhappy patient later. Dilated fundus examination is very important to rule out retinal degeneration, and performing laser to seal them is important. Also, myopic macular degeneration should also be thoroughly evaluated if required, and OCT should be performed if in doubt. IOL calculations. Now, A-scan biometry, what we do is to be done on a normal phakic mode. There is nothing different that we should do in the A-scan biometry. Both ultrasonic and optical biometer give fairly good result, optical biometry being the most accurate. Now, I would suggest that we should counter check the axial lens with two different type of biometers, ultrasonic and optical, just to be double sure, because we should always keep in mind this is the second surgery what is being done on the patient. For IOL calculation, I found Barrett Universal 2 to be the most appropriate, though Holiday 2 and Oslin also have good predictive value. In case of IOL selection, of course, we can put any kind of IOL, but because these patients are usually high myopes and we don't get multifocals in +7 or +8 range, I would say that we should go for a monofocal, or if a patient is having high toricity, we can go for toric IOLs also. I prefer to keep my patient with a target myopia of 1.5 to 2, so that they achieve up around N8 for the intermediate distance, so they are more or less happy. Now, since most of the patients are high myopic, 3-piece IOL stays more stable, and Alcon Expand series, which I have implanted in 5 out of my 8 patients, MN60MA, are very stable. Perioperative period. Now let's talk about anesthesia. Since most of these patients are high myopic, it's better to avoid peribulbar block. In case of topical anesthesia, I would like to stress that we inject intracameral lidocaine to avoid discomfort, which can be there because of iris touch during phakic IOL manipulations or while we are trying to explant the phakic IOL. Subtenance is the second best anesthesia. Intraoperatively, it's preferred to have a trapezoid incision where the internal lip is around 3 mm and the external 2.8 mm. So the larger internal lip will allow good explantation of the phakic IOL. I would like to stress here to avoid extension of the external incision, because if the iris prolapse starts from there, it becomes tricky for the phacosurgery. Selection of viscoelastics is also very critical to avoid damage to the endothelium, as well as for the space creation for phakic IOL manipulation. So what I do is I inject viscoat above and I inject sodium hyaluronate, cohesive visco beneath the ICL, so I get good manipulative distance inside. For internal manipulations, I would like to use lens manipulator or iris repositor to just get the IOL above the iris. Once the IOL is above the iris, it can be explanted by ICL loading forceps or with help of 2 Macpherson forceps. Surgical technique, what the tricky part in this a little bit is CCC, because zonules the zonules can be loose because of usually being high myopic cases, and secondly because the anterior lens capsule dynamics are a little bit altered. So what I found is the Rexis forceps is more useful than to finish it with the cystitome. Another thing is we should, which is found to be beneficial, is decrease the irrigating bottle height and increase the flow rate to avoid deepening in the anterior chamber. In case of lens iris diaphragm retropulsion syndrome, which is more commonly seen in high myopes, which is characterized by reverse pupillary block, pupil dilation and pain, we can use a spatula, cannula or a Sinskey hook and just elevate the pupil margin a little bit so that this syndrome is relieved. Post-operatively, I would like to stress to start on NSAIDs and cycloplegic plus topical steroids, because there is a little handling of the iris which can lead to CME and intraocular inflammation. I am playing here a small video of a phakic IOL explantation and cataract surgery.
Dr. Anuprita, the voiceover is not very clear. You can mute it and you can speak.
Okay.
On the right hand corner is the mute button.
Okay, so the internal incision is 3 mm, and now we are injecting viscoat over, and then we injected a cohesive visco beneath the lens, and now we are manipulating the lens outside the sulcus. Here we are using a Sinskey hook, but I found that in later cases the iris repositor or the lens manipulator is better, because in one case I just ruptured the anterior capsule. So I think iris repositor is better than the Sinskey hook. I'm not finding that video of mine. And with McPherson forceps, it's easily explanted, the ICL. And rest the phaco surgery is same as usual, because these are anterior subcapsular cataract. The nucleus are usually soft, and as I told, we usually decrease the bottle height, the flow rate we increase, because the high myopia thing should be taken into the consideration. The rest of the phaco is as we do in our usual case. Postoperatively, on the day 3, the patient had very minimal corneal edema, and the patient was happy.
I think also the time is also up.
Okay, yeah, I will just forward it. Yeah, I thank Mukesh, and I thank Colonel Madan Deshpande and HB Desai Eye Hospital. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we are well before time. So if at all the panelists would like to discuss for the next 2 minutes is okay, because we are 10 minutes before the next session starts.
I just have a question to Anuprita. What were the ICL, as in what material was the ICL, or rather the phakic lens in these patients who had cataract?
They were the V4 model. They were, I think, implanted in 2014 or 15.
This one was an IPCL.
This was an IPCL. This was the version 1 IPCL.
Okay, the others were all V4.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right.
So I would like to ask the panelists, like usually if you have a residual error post ICL, what is your procedure of choice to tackle the residual error? I think I've done an exchange of phakic IOL in only one patient, and I've done a surface treatment in one. But if there's a significant error, like a 1.5 cylinder, if patient is unhappy, so what is your procedure of choice to deal with a residual refractive error?
So very recently, I've had a patient who I followed up for 6 months. I thought that somehow or the other binocularly he would manage, but he just wouldn't. He was only fixating on, he had a residual of 1.25 at 40 degrees of a cylinder, and he was just not happy binocularly. So I did a streamlined PRK for his eye, but I waited until the axis and everything settled. It is very rare to have a residual of more than 2 diopters, I think, because our measurements are so accurate and we do it multiple times. So that small refractive error like this, we could always touch it up with a laser procedure.
Okay.
So I had to dial 2 lenses for having a residual cylinder,
Yes.
and had done a LASIK over one patient. And otherwise I prescribe glasses because that's the safest thing to do.
So Mukesh, for this patient, I rotated his lens twice, and I just couldn't understand that it was sitting bang on. We even spoke to the manufacturers to understand, is there probably a low power of cylinder in the lens that may have been there, but it was just not getting corrected.
So in these cases, best is to give glasses. You can't do anything else.
This
If they are
patient-
aligned well, if there's a spherocylinder, so if you have a plus with a minus or a minus with a plus, then they usually benefit
Okay.
by rotation.
So he was
Otherwise, they won't.
pure cylindrical error residual. There was absolutely no spherical component left.
And if it was well aligned, the rotation will not help.
Not help.
Yeah. I mean, I did it twice still because, and plus the patient's personality was such that he was very keen. I did it to get rid of glasses. So I need to be rid of glasses.
Great.
The ICL that I exchanged for a residual error, I dialed it twice. There was no change in the axis of the 1.5 cylinder kept on changing, but ultimately I exchanged it. So I had to get it out, then wait, remeasure, and then order a new one.
So did you send that lens to the manufacturers? Could they find if there was?
They were kind enough to help me with the rotation initially, and then when the patient was still unhappy, they agreed for.
No, as in, did they analyze and see optically on their optical desk whether this was?
I don't think they're going to accept that there was an error in their lens. So no. Yeah.
And I just want to ask the panelists, what is your take on use of pilocarpine? Because ever since that incident, I have stopped, and I don't.
I have stopped using pilocarpine at all.
Yeah.
Only if I have to make a PI, otherwise no.
Which you would normally do preoperatively?
No, we do it intraop only. Yeah, so I think we'll conclude here. We have still 5 minutes to go, but I think let's give it to the next session speakers. And thank you, Ragini ma'am, MOS, and all the panelists for joining in for this wonderful Phakic IOL IC that we had. We conclude here. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Ragini ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Mukesh. Thank you, Dr. Tanvi, Dr. Anuprita, Dr. Ridhima. Wonderful session. Great science. Thank you so much for this lovely session. Thank you. Thank you so much.